of 2022. It's nice to see your faces. I'm relieved that we can do that. And apologies that we weren't able to do this in person again. I know some of us were really excited to checking out the new Campbell expansion and renovation, and it is beautiful. And so we do promise to reschedule that, hopefully, for a time that won't be as unlucky. And in the meantime, I think there is a virtual tour that we can send your way. So you can at least get a sense of what's going on there. So our agenda for today is really to go over the FY21 bond and levy report, which we sent out ahead of time. I'm going to kind of briefly walk you through that report, and a lot of that report is project updates, so we'll also kind of provide some project updates along the way. We will likely go to council in probably February or March with this update. And as in years past, we accompany the report with a letter from the advisory board. And so I'd be interested in hearing any themes that folks are interested in touching on. After our report update, we'll see kind of what bubbles up from that. And then we just have some additional kind of what's going on around parks and recreation updates that we want to share, and see if there's any other questions or agenda items people want to touch on. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I am going to kick it off by sharing my screen. Can you see the bond and levy update cover? Okay, thank you. Okay, so a big shout out goes to Alyssa for once again making this beautiful and putting in all the great photos. It's a real team effort pulling this project together. Cinnamon is super helpful with all the financial information, and we have a format that we have used for the last 2 years that we carried forward with this year as well, because we think it works well. It's pretty simple, but we feel like the information is there. So we've continued with that. And so I'm just going to kind of scroll through and talk about what's in the report, and feel free to ask questions as we go. Or if there's a larger discussion item you want to touch on, feel free to hold it to the end and we'll have time to talk then as well. That's all kind of self-explanatory. We just start off with the letter from the Craigs introducing the report each year. And then we have a little bit of a summary of kind of what this report is all about and where we are. And so we talk about the fact that some of our biggest projects have actually now been completed or are nearing completion. And you'll see that how that kind of breaks down in our financial expenditures of bond funds. We talk about you, of course, our Citizen Advisory Board. And I think then we kind of have a refresher of what exactly we said we would do in this bond measure. So we have the actual verbiage from the measure itself, as well as the council resolution that identifies all the different projects. This is kind of the promises made section of the report. And then we get into kind of our project update and progress chart to start talking about kind of where we are with each project and getting into the promises kept side of the report. So this is the same map that we have used since the beginning. It breaks down each one of the projects by the different type of project that it is. And then on the right-hand side is the overall progress chart. And, we break it down by, is it in the planning phase, the design phase, the construction phase, or complete? And so those red check marks are increasing every year. And then we also have our expected completion dates for all of the projects identified there. So, and these are as of December of 2021. So about all told, all of these, with looking at all of these projects, we have about 75% of all of the projects that are either completed or in process in some way. So that's pretty good, 3 years in. And some will take longer than others, obviously. So this is kind of the project update side of things. We're not going to talk about every single project. Just want to talk about kind of the projects that are new to you that maybe you haven't heard about before. So a number of projects have been completed this past year. And we'll just also kind of chime in with whoever has information, like Jeff or Craig. Feel free to jump in. And I do have a few photos to show as well. But Alton Baker Park lighting just did wrap up within the last couple of months. That was a much needed process to upgrade the lighting in Alton Baker Park. We didn't add any new lighting. It was all replacement lighting because those fixtures were all, decades old, and many of them were not working at all. And so the entire section of Prees Trail that is in the western side of Alton Baker Park has been replaced. We thought when we first started the project, we would only be able to light Prees Trail, but because some bids came in a little lower than we thought, we were able to actually replace some of the lighting around the main lawn area and the restroom. So that's terrific. So we're pleased with that. Amazon Park was done the previous year, so I won't touch on that one. Campbell and Echo, I think we've already talked about, but I'm going to leave it to Jeff and Craig whether or not you want to give any updates about either one of those.
Yeah, I can just add real briefly that we started programming in them, and the staff who operate the facilities really love the new design and the layout between how the staff operate with the new wing and the old wing. The whole design is about getting more programming in there, and we have a lot of programming space now that can really be expanding what we do, but we simply, because of COVID, we have not been able to use that extra value yet, simply because of COVID. And then primarily, or one of the pieces with Campbell that is unique is the public art component of it is complete. And so if you get outside the building, you can see the public art. So, and then I can jump into Echo as well. It's, again, it was opened this summer. I know some of you attended the opening. And again, staff have operated it. The amenities that we've added, the locker rooms, the additional recreation pool and the additional lap swim pool are hugely popular. In fact, the little gal going down the slide on the cover got to name the slide there the Green Dragon, if you all remember that. And so hopefully that sticks to that new element. The public art at Kohala Pool is not complete at this time. It will be months away because of supply line problems. And then there's a few other items to do, like creating shade structures and range structures for the facility out there. So brief updates on those facilities that are open and operational, but certainly not able to get their full value at this time.
But poised for that, right?
We are poised, yeah. I will
Yeah.
just add, just for your own information, that as we go into Sheldon Poole construction as well, is that we're actually, Amazon and Alcoholic Pool have been open all winter, but we're having a real hard time, a very challenging time getting enough lifeguards to work it during its normal operating hours, which are early morning to evening. We're simply at the brink of having to close down certain times because of breakouts with our temporary staff around COVID and whatnot. And it's just so, it's very thin on just barely keeping the pools open at this time. And we're worried about that going into next summer with the potential for 3 pools to be serviceable.
So let us know if you know any lifeguards.
Yes, we're looking for lifeguards. Please send lifeguards our way.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Craig. Moving on then, we also completed the artificial turf fields that we do in conjunction with the school districts. So that's two fields with 4J and 2 fields with Bethel School District. And those are all completed, and the school districts kind of manage those contracts and we just provide the money. So those were easily completed. Southbank Path is the next project. These are alphabetical, by the way, if you're wondering what the order is. That was just kind of how we're doing it with the report for ease of finding projects. But Southbank Path is the portion of the bike path that actually goes through University of Oregon property. And so it starts kind of at the east end of the new Riverfront park and heads over toward to the Frohmeyer Bridge. And so that project we did in coordination with Public Works Transportation, because the entire bike path has been rerouted. And then with the bond measure, we contributed the funds for the lighting of that project. So another lighting project. And that is complete. It looks a little bit different because it's on a university property. They wanted to use their standard light fixtures. So most people don't notice those things, but I do. And but they look good. And so so that project is complete. Tugman was our first project done back in 2019, so I don't need to talk about that. And West Bank was actually done, completed about this time last year, so we've probably likely talked about that too. But I will just remind folks, we did not have lighting on the West Bank Path before. So starting at the bridge at Maury Jacobs Park there, going along the west side of the river all the way north to Beltline, there was no lighting. And now it doesn't go all the way to Beltline because it kind of veers off onto streets at one point, but there is lighting all along that section of bike path now, and people are really excited about it. So that's been terrific. So then the next grouping of projects are those that are underway and are very near completion. Berkeley Park is, we're just kind of going through the punch list with the contractor, but it is substantially complete. That is a neighborhood park. And I have a photo I'll show you in just a moment of that, but it's a great upgrade to a park that was just really kind of underdeveloped originally. And then downtown Riverfront Park, which is amazing and beautiful, and we're really excited to see it open. The current estimate is April for that project to open. It's been a little bit delayed. It had a number of challenges with COVID and things like that. Currently, what we're waiting on are some of the bronze art pieces that are actually inlaid into the pathways themselves. We cannot open the park until we have safe pathways to walk on. And so we're waiting for those bronze pieces to be complete. And there's a variety of other kind of finishing touches that are going on in that park. It will be beautiful. And I have a few recent photos to show you of that as well. We also have funding for neighborhood park lighting, and we didn't really specify in the bond which neighborhood parks because we hadn't done that scoping yet. But we were glad we had that line item because all of the park lighting for Monroe Park just failed. And so we have had a temporary light just kind of strung up there for about 6 months now. And it's an urban park. It's the kind of park that needs light. And so that work should be done this month. And so we're excited to be able to, that we had the funds to be able to, get that work done in what was kind of an urgent situation and an unanticipated situation. Which then brings us to Sheldon Poole. So I'll kick it back to Craig and Jeff.
All right, I'm happy to talk about Sheldon. The project's moving right along. Actually, Carolyn, if you want to back up a slide, that's a photo of the new addition and the vortex pool. That'll be a warm water pool, but also serve as a recreational pool for everyone. One of the exciting things, they're going to plaster that this week. So they're getting really close to finishing that. A lot of elements of the projects have already been completed. The roof, the solar panels are on, the HVAC system, which we were actually really worried about, is there and has been installed. It's not fully operational yet, but it's in place. I sat on a boat out in Seattle, out in the Sound, I think for 3 months before it actually arrived. So we were kind of sweating that. But it's all there and everything's moving forward as planned. Contractor's doing a great job, so we're really happy about that. The project's scheduled to be completed or substantially complete by March 11th, which means we'll be able to take possession of it and start using the facility. It's often there's still some punch list items that need to be completed after that, but that's basically when we'll get occupancy. Shortly thereafter, we'll be able to close Amazon Pool to do our, annual, actually, it's been a couple years now, but our annual maintenance work and get that prepped and ready to go for the summer, assuming Craig's team has all the lifeguards they need and everything else. And so we're excited about that. And just as a reminder, once Sheldon comes back online, the plan is to only operate Amazon seasonally as we had done in the past. And so that is one minor change, but we'll have great amenities in the wintertime now. So that's the update for Sheldon.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, our next batch is coming soon. And so we these are projects that are kind of in the design phase. And with construction expected this year, Amazon Creek Habitat Restoration, which is, we're calling it the Amazon Creek Rewilding because it's replacing the concrete section of the channel between 24th and 19th. And so that work will get underway. It'll be done in over 2 years. And we have, the bond measure is paying for kind of a small portion of that. Stormwater funding is paying for a larger portion of that project. We'll also be rebuilding the tennis courts at Churchill High School this spring. So as soon as the tennis season is over, we'll get that, we will completely demolish those courts and rebuild them. And they are kind of sitting on a lot of clay, which shrinks and swells and cracks, and they're just in terrible shape. So that will be a good project, completely rebuilding those courts. In addition to the Monroe Park lighting, we're also doing some restroom renovation at Monroe Park. That restroom was never intended to be year-round. And so it has these kind of louvers that actually let a lot of water into the restroom during the winter. And we are at a point with our system where we need our that restroom in particular to be open year-round And so we're making modifications to the roof, to the floors, kind of replacing some of the doors and fixtures to have a more fully functional restroom. Again, it's a park in a pretty urban location, which really requires that amenity. Santa Clara Community Park is in the design phase, and I might want to add some language in the report about this project, because the project manager who has been working on the construction drawings for this project just moved to Boise. Jason Miller was a wonderful landscape architect in our engineering division, super productive. And we have his position out posted currently, so we hope to replace him soon, but that may put this project, push it into next year. And we have kind of hedged our bets on that for a little while, understanding that it's a pretty big project. So we've been saying publicly either 2022 or 2023, but we might want to make a note in this. Oh, well, yeah, I might need to update that section of the report. And then Stryker Field should be out to bid any day now. And excited to get that one out there, 8-acre park with about a $3.5 million budget. So it'll be one of our bigger kind of neighborhood parks that come out of this bond measure. And people are very eager to see that come about. So those are all the projects that we anticipate seeing under construction this year or soon after. And then I'll just also briefly touch on kind of where we sit in the planning realm. We are just getting underway with planning the next round of projects, which include Maddie Reynolds Park and MLK Junior Park renovation. We have a public engagement consultant that we're working with, and we will do all of our kind of normal traditional outreach to the neighborhoods that we're working in for both those parks. But we're also reaching out to Eugene's Black community, because both of these parks are significant to Eugene's Black community. And so we're forming a committee of about 8 to 10 people who will kind of help guide us through the planning and design of these parks. Again, and then they'll kind of work with us as we're also engaging the rest of the community. So we're really excited to be able to have those important conversations about how do we build inclusive parks in Eugene where everybody feels safe and welcome? What can we be doing better as we build these new parks and as we renovate existing parks? And what are the opportunities for cultural expression in these areas? Interpretation, storytelling, public art. We do think that we'll have 1% for art funding, particularly at Maddie Reynolds Park. And for those of you who don't know, Maddie Reynolds Park is named for Maddie Reynolds, who is one of Eugene's pioneer Black families. She's kind of the matriarch of the family, lived in the Across the Bridge community, which was the encampment where people lived in Alton Baker Park when Black people were not allowed to live in the city of Eugene. And then that community was dislocated when the Ferry Street Bridge was built. And so that community was kind of dispersed around the surrounds of Eugene, again, because they couldn't live in the city. A number of people located out in West Eugene. And Maddie Reynolds Park is in the area where a lot of those families relocated. And so the park is named in Maddie Reynolds' honor, and it is obviously a wonderful place to make sure that people understand that history, and also that we kind of make investments in that community, because it doesn't have a lot of public infrastructure and parks and open space infrastructure currently. So that's Maddie Reynolds Park, in case you didn't know. And then obviously MLK Junior Park is a small 1 acre park. It hasn't been renovated in a long time, although it does hold a lot of significance for a variety of events for Eugene's Black community. And so we're looking forward to being able to renovate that and getting some good engagement around that. Suzanne Arley, Ridgeline Trail, we have created our master plan for that park, but now we're in the design phase of the trail and the mountain bike facilities. We're currently actually applying for a $1.1 million grant from the federal government to help us build out more of those facilities. This grant is specific to tourism and economic development, and it is due in about 2 weeks, and it's kind of a beast. So a lot of us are working on that one. And then last but not least, the sports complex at Golden Gardens. We have an RFP out to hire a master planning consultant who will help us master plan this 223 acre park site, looking at, up to 16 sports fields, neighborhood park, natural area, just help create the vision and phasing plan for that entire site, as well as cost estimates, which will be really beneficial for us to know how to best spend the rather modest amount of money that we have for phase 1 implementation. So, man, I feel like I've been talking a long time. I'm almost done with this section. And then I'll put it out for questions before we keep going. But the next part is ongoing habitat restoration. There wasn't a lot of money in the bond devoted to habitat restoration, but what we have goes a long way. So we have so far done a lot of renovation at Skinner Butte. The actual butte itself, we did a ton of work to remove invasive plants and fuels, other words for, to reduce threat of wildfire. And so we removed a lot of vegetation from the south side of the butte. And now we've been planting a lot of native plants to replace that. 370 trees and shrubs just in phase 1. And there will be additional planting coming. We'll also be doing a lot of planting along the riparian corridor in Skinner Butte. And then the remainder of our restoration funds are all focused on the Ridgeline Trail system or park system. So we've spent a lot of money at Arley doing invasives removal. And we've been able to leverage that money with some grant funds from the Bureau of Land Management, who is very interested in helping us to reduce our fuels, to reduce the threat of wildfire. So we've been able to really make those dollars go far. We'll also be spending money at South Eugene Meadows, Wild Iris Ridge, Spencer Butte Trailhead, and a few other kind of scatterings throughout the Ridgeline system. So those are the habitat projects. And I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for a second. And before we get into the rest of the report, which is kind of the financial pieces of it, I just wanted to see if there's any questions about any of these projects and where they're headed. I see Whitney has her hand up.
Hi, Carolyn, good to see you.
You too.
Can you please circle back to Riverfront
Yes.
and talk about what the goal was in terms of completion aligned with the World Championships and what is going to be in place when those start?
Yeah. Well, the postponement of the World Championships by a year has certainly helped us reach our goals of what we want to have ready. Actually, everything that we wanted to have ready originally by 2021 will be ready by the start of the championships in 2022. So the park will be fully open and functional. As you may have seen in the paper, will be the location of kind of the big festival, the Riverfront Festival, that will be kind of the free portion of the event where the community can come and participate in the events surrounding the championships. So there will be just a lot going on throughout the 10 days of the event. There'll be legacy murals, kid zones, a zip line, artisans and sponsors, space for them, food and beverage vendors, a family zone, areas for spoken word, a main stage. It's really kind of where the events and the athletes and kind of what happens inside the stadium kind of interfaces with the community. And so a lot of that will take place on the 3-acre park site, but a lot of it will also take place in the adjacent land, like the plaza area, which will be just kind of a grassy area, and some of the future development sites that will actually become part of the developed portion of the riverfront parcel. So it's kind of good timing that we have that much undeveloped space on our riverfront right now to be able to host a festival of that size. And I don't know, is there anybody here who might be able to describe the events of the festival better than I can?
Carolyn did an awesome job. She got most of it. I don't know that there's much to add. The only thing I would add is, our goals around celebrating not only our community, but Oregon. This is our opportunity. It will be a free, accessible event. And we're paying a lot of attention to including our BIPOC community and others. We have an equity advisory panel that's helping us with that as well. And it will also be live streamed. The event will be live streamed in the festival area, which will provide access to the community in ways that for those that can't actually afford attending the event at Hayward Field. So it's a pretty exciting thing that we're working on. We've hired a production company called Revere. And so we're working closely with them to pull this off. It's an all hands on deck kind of thing, as well as the event itself. We're working pretty closely with Oregon 22 on all things transportation and security and everything you can imagine that goes along with putting together these types of events, which we have a lot of experience with, not the World Championships, but many other big track and field events for sure.
Thanks, Renee. Whitney, does that answer your question? Great. Any other questions out there? I know it's a lot to go over.
Carolyn, were you going to
Yes.
show us pictures of some of
Oh,
those?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the prompt. I don't have pictures of everything, but just of some of the newer completed projects. So this is an example of a fresh new artificial turf field. Looks wonderful and squishy, and all the lines are fresh. So again, we had 4 of those. This is Southbank Path, and so the entire path was actually resurfaced with funding from the transportation bond, And our piece was the lighting. And so this was a section of path that was not lit previously. You can see there's a lot of dense vegetation along this section of path. Feels a lot safer in the evening and at night. And we are, even though there was some concern from portions of the community about kind of, impacts to habitat, about impacts to kind of the dark sky and the ability to see the stars. The feedback we have gotten to date has been 100% positive. People feel much safer on the path, and the way that these new lights work, there isn't a lot of glare, there isn't a lot of light pollution. The light is very much focused on the path, and so it's when we use a warmer temperature lighting, which is more friendly to the critters that are in that habitat, and so it's been great. And so this is kind of the standard lighting that you'll see in our other areas. So this is Pre's Trail. This was, again, a replacement project. And then also, as I mentioned, we were able to do some additional lighting around, or additional replacement lighting around the main lawn area in Alton Baker Park. So Alton Baker Park is feeling much lighter and brighter and safer also these days. This is the Southbank Path, the portion that goes through the university property. You can see the poles are green, and it looks to me like the heads aren't on those poles yet, but I can't quite tell. But in general, that's what it will look like. That path is open currently. And again, that is a brand new path that was rerouted and was also previously not lit before. So this is another section of our path system that now has lighting. This is Berkeley Park, and it really just finished up in the last couple of weeks. And as you know, it's been a lot of rain and gray skies, so we don't have a great picture of it yet, but just trust me, in the spring when all that grass comes in and we have some blue sky and we have people actually in the park, it's going to look amazing. We have, you can see straight ahead, a really large sand play area, as well as a large newly located and completely new equipment play area. We also have a small nature play component to the playground, new accessible pathways, this picnic plaza, which is new. So that's kind of what's going on at Berkeley. There will be grand openings for these new parks also once we get into spring and summer. Here's some great new a drone photo of Riverfront Park. So you can see it is primarily completed. There are these sections in the path that have missing pieces, and that's where the bronze artwork will go. But in the meantime, the seating is in, there's this lovely wood deck, all of the landscaping is in, the bike path is in, and the parallel pedestrian system, which is a first for us in Eugene. I have a couple more pictures. This is the wood deck being installed. It has this really cool structure that goes out over it, and the most amazing views of the river that we have in Eugene. And I'll also tell you, if you sit in this spot right here, it's like hearing the river in stereo. There's some really weird thing with the acoustics of that particular piece of that bench area, where like somebody's sitting right next to you, you can hardly hear a word they're saying. It's just all river. So that's the spot. That's pretty cool. And then this is the the pavilion, the art pavilion, which we're looking up at it from below. It's made of this very shiny steel that reflects the river from below. And if you know the bean in Chicago, it has that, it's kind of that same effect where you can like see yourself and you're distorted. And so this is just a beautiful piece of artwork on its own, but it is also a place where art can be presented, be it performance art or visual art, where we can kind of host events. I'll just show you on this plan. So it's actually just to below the screen, kind of to, I guess that would be to the east or to the west of where this picture drops off is where that art pavilion is. It's at the terminus of Fifth Street. So as you're walking down Fifth Street, it now connects to the river, and that art pavilion is kind of framing a view of the river. I can't wait for you guys to see it in person. So those are the photos that I wanted to share.
Thank you.
Sure. That bring up any more questions, or should we keep on going with the report? Okay, let's see. Obviously, leveraging bond funds remains a goal of ours, and we have so far received one grant for Delta Ponds, a $350,000 grant. As I mentioned, we're currently putting in for a grant for Suzanne Arley Park. We did attempt a grant through the federal government for Santa Clara. That didn't come through. So currently we're at 50% in our success rate. We're going to keep putting them out there and just stretching our dollars as far as we can. And then we're also we'll be looking at donations and accepting those and working with the Parks Foundation. We actually have a capital campaign that will be kicking off with the Parks Foundation pretty soon. That maybe at our next meeting when Scott's here, we can talk about that a little bit more. But always looking for new funding sources, which takes us to the next portion of the report, which is where we look at our expenditures. This is the same format that we've used the last 2 years, but it just keeps getting bigger because we keep adding on, each additional year. And so we show our expenditures in two different ways. This first chart on the left-hand side kind of does it by expense category. So we're looking at kind of materials and supplies or contractual services, personnel, construction, utilities, and then just the costs of issuing bonds. And we're for the fiscal year that we're currently in, the way we break it down is, what were the expenditures of bond funds, but then, we always are matching with other types of funding via SDCs or transportation bonds or other things. And so we always have our other spending also categorized, and then our totals. And then we have the total spending to date since the beginning of the bond. So we're almost to $40 million so far in total spending. Let's see, whoops, this pie chart down below just shows spending to date of the bond dollars. And what that shows is that we have almost spent half of our bond dollar funds to date. So the next way that we present this information is by each project. And so we only are showing the projects where there have actually been expenditures taking place. So there are some projects that haven't hit this chart yet because we haven't expended any money yet. But what happens once we do start expending project dollars, they show up on this chart and we track how many bond dollars, how many other types of dollars, and then that is all tallied up over the years. And so this is another project or chart that keeps getting bigger with each new fiscal year. So to date for FY21, we spent about $10.3 million in bond funds, about $14.5 million in other expenditures for a total of almost $25 million. So, and that in large part you can see is some of the larger facility projects. So, you know, the Echo Hollow, the Campbell and the Sheldon are kind of have been our big ticket items to date and where we've seen a lot of those expenditures, as well as Riverfront Park. So I will pause there and see if anybody has any questions about this, and then I'll kick it over to Chris to walk us through the levy. And I can't see everybody, so if you raise, just go ahead and unmute if you have a question.
Hi, it's Whitney again. I know that the spending doesn't necessarily follow a linear path and the rate of spend on any, I get all of that. But from an overall perspective, I'm just wondering, maybe for your letter, is there a statement that can be made again about efficiency and leveraging additional funds? You opened the call with, we're 75% in the ground or done, and we're 50% through the money. Again, I know it's not a one-to-one, but is there something that can be fleshed out there that speaks to efficiency and tapping into additional resources and showcasing the responsibility of getting farther than halfway through projects at the 50% spend point in time?
Yeah. Boy, I'm gonna think about that. I think I don't think that I can say that, look at us, we're 25% under budget. You know, because we've got 75% started and only 50, because we don't, you know, the spending really picks up once you get into construction. The early phases of a project, it's just staff time. And once you get into those construction contracts, is where the money really starts rolling out the door. However, I like the concept and thinking about A, efficiency, B, leveraging, and then how those two kind of data points can be utilized. So I'm going to think about that some more. And if anybody has any ideas, let me know.
So Carolyn, I just wanted to make a comment really quick.
Thanks.
Just for the entire team to just kind of know. So our fiscal year runs from July 1st to June 30th. And June 30th is usually about the beginning or the first month of the construction season. And so projects will generally be completed before all of the bills are paid and all of that. So that's just an FYI for people as you're looking at this, to kind of keep that in the back of your mind, that the construction projects will finish, then we kind of pay the bills after the fact. And so I just wanted to say that's not the reasoning behind all of it, but it's just something to keep in mind as you're looking at these numbers.
Excellent point, Cinnamon. Thank you.
Yeah, and Whitney, I appreciate the comment too. And I think we've done a really good job of leveraging other dollars. We went into this work knowing that's what we were going to do. I mean, Carolyn mentioned transportation dollars and SGCs and other such. So I think that's really helped out, and that's a story that we should definitely highlight. And so appreciate the comment, and we'll definitely work on doing that.
I did also want to note, there is a note in the charts themselves, but when we were doing the kind of accounting for this report, we noticed kind of a discrepancy with some of the personnel costs, and we discovered that some of the personnel costs were actually being double counted the way that our reporting was coming out. And so we fixed that for 21. But then we went back and we looked, was that a problem in FY 19 and 20 that we didn't catch at the time? And we found that it was. And so it wasn't a big problem. It's not huge dollar amounts, but we wanted FY 19 and FY 20 to be as accurate as we can be, and so that we're just being consistent in how we report this data throughout the entire bond. So I just wanted to note that that was discovered. And so, any other questions? If none, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Chris Gerard. Chris, are you there?
I am, although I can't see very many people, but good afternoon, everyone. I guess it's almost evening because it's dark out. I recently read in the paper that we'd seen our last 4 o'clock hour sunset, and it made me very happy. So the levy status. So as in former years, the levy is promises and services delivered based on those promises. So levy status, as mentioned, we went out and looked at what the community wanted. And then we took that into consideration and then took action on that. So Carolyn, when we go through this, I'll ask you just to forward the slide, but the big thing in FY21 is that we continued to offer increase in daily service of parks, kept restrooms open and serviced, maintained the new garbage cans, portable restrooms, and picnic tables throughout the system, revitalized trails and trailheads, and increased park safety and more. And as the page says, that work continued, and we were getting prepared to pass the baton to FY22. So as new bond projects come online in FY22 and FY23, the levy is just going to be more important to maintain those. So Carolyn, if you can move to the next slide. By the way, that's a great photo of Josiah Sheehan performing some work over there on the right. I think that's Josiah, isn't it?
I think so too. Yep.
Yeah, so he's one of our Park Spec 4's super valuable person. So if you want to roll up to the next slide. So COVID was big for us in FY21. So the ongoing COVID impacts, we had sanctioned camping that was going on, and some of our staff was heavily involved in managing the sanctioned camps, both at 13th Street and at Washington Jefferson Park. I could spend the majority of our time talking about our staff efforts to make those two locations successful, but the sanctioned camping management was a significant undertaking of our staff. So that was a big impact as we saw camping managed and unmanaged still impacting our park system. Are there any questions about the impacts of COVID-19 while I'm on that subject? Okay, and I also want to mention that in the past year that Google data stated that our park usage had increased significantly. some of the numbers that I remember were up into the 125 and 30% usage range. And I actually looked for some of that data recently and struggled to find it. But just from what my experience tells me, that our park usage is still quite significant. If you go out on a nice day, the bike paths are really full and our parks are just being absolutely loved, as people are, still staying out of restaurants and, avoiding events. Open space and parks are a place where people go, which has generated more trash and things of that nature, which makes the levy really important with additional services that we can provide to do that. So let's talk a little about projects completed and ongoing now. Park safety. So we have 2 dedicated full-time police park resource officers, which are Officer Eason and Hubbard, and their role has been significant in helping us deal with the issues that we have in parks and keep parks safer. And then in addition to the full-time park, the 2 full-time park ambassadors and 2 seasonal ambassadors, Parks hired a 3rd-tier limited duration park ambassador position. And I believe that's Alan Brown. And they make a tremendous difference in our park system. They provide a welcome presence and answer questions and help us with some of the activities that are going on parks and things of that nature. But if you go into a park and engage one of our park ambassadors, they're highly professional and just excellent at what they do. And they make our parks feel safer for sure. And they also help on the maintenance side as well with reporting items that maintenance may need to take care of, that may impact the park user's experience. And then we also have late night security services. The park expanded in FY21 to keep up with evolving hotspots for illicit activities. And I believe that was the DPI contract. Craig, are you there? That would be the security contract that we had with St. Vincent de Paul that would basically, they patrol our park systems, and based on our park safety meetings that we would have, we would ask them to do some things, and then they would be our eyes in the park system after hours. And then the cleanup response team, which was formed in 2018, remains active and focused on the cleanup of abandoned campsites and graffiti removed. In FY21, this team removed 1,403 cubic yards of garbage from the park system and abated 1,309 graffiti incidents, which is a significant increase. So we have a 0.5 FTE that is dedicated towards graffiti removal. And this is Amanda in the photo that's removing graffitis. And she recently moved to a full-time levy-funded position on the illicit activities team. So she's a great addition to that team. And I also looked at some numbers earlier today, but in FY21, the illicit activities team and ambassadors cleaned up 2,371 campsites for their efforts, which is a significant amount of camping. So with that, any questions around park safety while I'm on the topic? Okay, so with that, let's move on to park maintenance. So as mentioned previously, the levy is services promises and service delivered. So we opened 6 restrooms at the start, and we continue to provide 6 restrooms that were previously closed due to budget reductions. And that represents a 22% increase in available restrooms for public use. Our restrooms are extremely important in our park system. Anybody who's been in a park system and with little kids around playgrounds and things of that nature, just so happy to say that we're able to continue to provide that increase. Daily maintenance services such as litter and trash pickup and restroom cleaning continues throughout the developed park system. And this represents a 55% increase in services compared to pre-levy activities. And that entails that in the summer months that our staff visits all of our parks at least once a day, picking up trash and checking to make sure that everything's functioning, playground inspections and things of that nature. And so if you have a neighborhood park, it ensures that during the summer months that you're going to get at least a visit daily to check and see that everything's functioning well and okay. And then we also implemented a levy-funded seasonal late afternoon and evening maintenance team. Last year, we had 4 staff members that were on that group, and they provide services such as restroom rechecks, perform minor maintenance projects and things of that nature in some of our busiest corridors, which would be the Riverfront Park system, the Amazon corridor, and then some of our parks out west, Bethel Community Parks. But they're also available if we have something that comes up after hours to go out and fix or check on. So that has been a great help to our staff that shows up in the morning, because they'll find a restroom that's restocked and relatively clean when they open it up in the morning. So they're able to just move through the system a little bit faster. Turf health throughout the park system continues to improve with additional irrigation repair and support and overseeding and renovation and fertilization. And Carolyn mentioned part of the bond project with irrigation. One of the bond projects is to hire a consultant to evaluate our irrigation system that would meet some of our salmon safe goals and make us more efficient. And it just checks off a whole bunch of boxes, how we can improve our irrigation system. So when that's finally ready to go, we'll learn a lot from that process. So I look forward to that. Also, everybody knows that it was really hot last year, right? I mean, we had temperatures of 114 degrees in the valley, so to speak, and it really had an impact on some of our turf and our water rates and things of that nature. So the increased turf health certainly helped us weather that storm, so to speak. And without that, the bounce back wouldn't have been as quick. So I certainly appreciate our staff's efforts in that. And then in inventory of our trees to identify where we need to put our resources for park safety and removing, hazard trees and things of that nature is funded by the levy. And I believe that we put about $35,000 towards that in FY21, and we removed or pruned 192 park trees. And that may sound like a lot, but we also, which isn't shown in the data here, it may be down, but we planted about 335 trees as well throughout the park system and natural areas. So the trees that we removed were offset by that additional planting. So let's talk about trail and natural area maintenance for a little bit. In FY21 was a good year for trail maintenance. We resurfaced roughly 5 miles of walking and running trails. In addition, staff removed overgrown vegetation along just under 6 miles. So, and that was primarily done in the Ridgeline Trail system. So if you've ever hiked, along trails and there's a lot of vegetation, especially if it rains, it hangs down. So it's great to see resurfaced trails where it's muddy and things like that. However, it's also great to see that they've removed vegetation along the sides of the trails, which just makes it much easier to pass and, just has a different feel versus, having things hang down in your way. And then levy-funded preventative maintenance continues in natural areas and future developed park sites. That was previously mentioned. We have some parks that aren't developed yet, but are on the books, Stryker Field and Santa Clara Community Park. This group does a lot of work of erecting fences and rough mowing and things like that to keep those parks in compliance. And, the fences that have been put up and things like that have stopped some illicit activities such as four-wheel driving in some of these areas. And it just makes it much more usable for people who are out there enjoying our open space before development. And then we have increased custodial services at 5 locations, including trailheads at Spencer Butte and other high-use sites. So if you go to our trailheads, the levy has made a big difference as far as providing garbage services and just picking things up at those trailheads. That wasn't a service that was readily provided in the past. So looking forward, the spending of levy funds is weighted more heavily in later years. So as we get going on these projects, and it takes a while to hire people and buy equipment and things of that nature. And some of the parks aren't built out early on. And so we transition through the levy. Our spending capacity in that is, reduced a little bit as we add services, which is exactly what we were supposed to do. So if we build a park, we have to take on maintenance and things. So one of the big things in FY22 and FY23 is that we're going to begin caring for turf and amenities and providing daily service at Santa Clara Community, Stryker Field, Maddie Reynolds, and the new downtown Riverfront Park that hopefully opens in early April so we can all celebrate. And then the downtown Riverfront Park alone features art and special seating and things that we've never seen in some of our parks before. As Carolyn showed, it's really super cool, but it's new for us. So we have to figure out exactly how it's all going to work, right? And it's kind of like moving into a house with a whole bunch of features that you haven't had before. You think you know what it is, and we've planned for it, but until we see how it functions, I'll freely admit that we haven't quite figured it out. And anybody who would say that we haven't completely figured out, they probably haven't worked in parks very long. So with that, we have some exciting challenges ahead, but things that we're certainly looking forward to. And then we'll also be adding a fourth limited duration park ambassador position, and I talked about that earlier in the public safety piece, which is Alan Brown. And that service, as I previously mentioned, is really vital, being out in the parks, helping people out and helping our operations staff, know about issues that are out there. And then funding work to mitigate hazardous trees will reduce recovery time during storm events. Everybody knows we just had a nice storm event right after, I guess, in between the holidays, right? And a lot of work that we have done with that levy funding around trees has actually helped reduce the situations that we had to deal with this time around. So knock on wood, we actually came through this last storm really well from a tree point of view, and the levy funding certainly helped with that. And then additional trash receptacles, picnic tables, benches, portable restrooms, and pet waste dispensers will continue to be added throughout the park system. We refer to those items as park furnishing. And not that long ago, we just finished putting the pet waste dispensers throughout the majority of our park system. And then we've also done a lot of work around putting up signage and things, as you can see in the photo. So lots going on from a levy standpoint. It's just constantly like one big wheel that just keeps rolling forward. So Carolyn, how about page 21? Levy expense categories. And so with this, I'll just go down to the first bullet point. Materials and supplies covers a wide range of expenses, including but not limited to administrative, office, paint, and sealers. That's pretty much everything that we need to operate the park system. And then contractual services includes tree maintenance, custodial, and ecological services, as well as facility and infrastructure repairs. These services are contracted with subject matter experts to ensure that just everything's done right in the park system. So personal expenses, as in past levy reports, are certainly our largest category of expenditures that we have. And right now, if my math is correct, and Sentiment or Craig, if I missed this, feel free to jump in. But it looks like we have a total of currently about 12 levy positions funded that do a variety of work out of that. And so utilities is also another large expense, and increases in park services. When we add a new park, we have additional electricity and irrigation, and lighting hours are increased in restroom services. And so every time that a new park comes on for the community to enjoy, it takes a little bit more of funds to operate that system. And then infrastructure maintenance, and these expenditures are related to contractual work that renovates, repairs, and maintains existing assets such as trails and parks. And I talked about that a little bit, how we resurfaced, over 5 miles of trail and got just shy of 6 miles on removing vegetation. And that's what those contracts are used for. And so if we want to take a look at the expense categories, so FY21 adopted budget for materials and supplies, which I'll just call it M&S, was a little over 68,000, and non-levy funds, which are, sorry, my screen is really tiny and I can't quite make that out. Carolyn, can you read that number?
Which number?
Under the materials and supplies for adopted budget, non-levy funds, the match. I apologize, I just cannot quite read that.
It's 1.9.
Yeah,
Million.
1.9 to total 2.67608.
You don't need to read all the numbers, Chris, because everybody has the report.
Yeah, super. So thanks, because I'm struggling to read that anyway.
Yeah.
So levy actual expenditures, you can take a look at that. Once again, materials and supplies is a significant amount, and contractual services, as well as our personal expenses, which are our largest, as was mentioned, and utilities being a big chunk of that, and then infrastructure maintenance, which are those contracts that I talked about. And so with that, if there's any questions about that, I can take them now. If not, we can move on to page 23. I feel like I'm moving really fast through this, so I apologize.
You're fine, Chris. Well explained.
Okay.
Are there any
questions? All right, page 23.
All right, so I think we'll hand it off to Alyssa, who's here, and can talk about the annual survey that we've started doing. So this is the second year we've done a survey, and I think Alyssa's going to tell us about that.
Yeah, so we worked with Terrell Group again over the summer to conduct our second annual survey. We had roughly the same amount of English surveys completed as 2020, but we actually saw a huge boost in the number of Spanish surveys. We went from just 27 the first year to 123 the second year. So that's awesome representation that we're getting in these numbers. Some trends that we really liked continued from 2020 into 2021. Eugene parks are still very important to the quality of life for residents, especially the Spanish language respondents. The highest satisfaction we're seeing comes from those who visit the most frequently. In 2020, the residents of Bethel were kind of outliers. They rated parks lower than any other area of Eugene in almost every category. But in 2021, those residents were overwhelmingly more positive in every aspect. So that's a great example of how we looked at these survey results and used them to help improve our services. So park staff worked on a lot of different fronts to improve the experience for that neighborhood. There was increased safety presence and regular work parties at an underused park, new turf fields that Carolyn talked about at Meadowview and Willamette High School, and then some improvements made at Golden Gardens. And we think that all those contributed to that major shift in perception that you see in the 2021 results. On the levy side, residents continue to see the importance of the levy and notice significant improvements since its passing. The greatest barriers to the enjoyment of parks was concern for personal safety and people camping. And we know that this past year, the congregation of unhoused campers in our temporarily sanctioned sites like Washington Jefferson really alleviated the strain of camping throughout the park system. So it tracks that we're seeing a correlated increase in the sense of safety for residents across the system. And those numbers are over a third of participants indicated that they felt safer in 2021 than 2020. So those are kind of the high level highlights, but we provide a link for the full survey report from Terrell, which is 40 pages. So you can dig as deep as you want into those numbers. There's definitely a lot there.
Awesome. Thanks, Alyssa. Any questions or comments on the survey?
I get to share one of my favorite UO instructor moments. You know, and so what is what I would say, right? Like when you have these great data points to share, they should inform something. It either affirms you're doing the right thing, and so you're going to do more of that, or we had a hypothesis and see this confirms or denies that hypothesis. So I would just, and maybe this goes in the letter, maybe this goes in how you talk about it at council, but I think there's an and so ... narrative moment that can come in that can either help lead you to where you want them to start thinking about what comes next around the corner, but to, I think, just leave it with data. You still have an opportunity to help the data sell the narrative that you want to sell.
Yeah. Thank you. And yeah, I think we can hit that home a little bit more. I think we took the information we learned from last year and we said, what's going on in Bethel? And, you know, so that was kind of our so what moment that year. And we feel like we really turned it around in Bethel. And so we can connect those dots and say, well, you know, based on what we were hearing and then what we did, we feel like we have kind of helped that neighborhood feel like they're served better. And also Echo Hollow Pool, I'm sure, has something to do with that. And so, yeah, I think we can tell that story, and then, and what are we doing with the results this year? And so what? So thank you. Always good advice. Any other thoughts about the survey? It's such a great tool. I'm so glad we do it every year, and we have this, you know, benchmark where we started, and we can just see how the trends are changing. It's been great. Okay, folks, that's the end of our report. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and let's see. And I guess any questions or themes you have, comments about the report, and any ideas for a letter. Now would be a good time to talk about those. We've already got some suggestions so far. Anyone else?
This is Jill. I just think the report's really nicely put together. Thank you for you guys doing that. And it's quite a lot of things that happened since we last met. So that, I think it's a job well done. I like Whitney's suggestions about really leveraging all that you have done to encourage the direction that we want to continue, because all this great work, right, is something that, if we've gotten all that positive feedback from the community, that seems like nice tailwind for future, you know, perhaps revenue requests. So I would just say nice job, and looks like we've made the group has made some substantial accomplishments towards the finalization of the project. So good job.
Thank you. Any other themes anyone wants us to touch on? And as we've done the last 2 years, I'll just go ahead and write a draft and send it out to you and make any edits you see fit, and we'll call it good from there. Okay. Next on our agenda are just some kind of additional project updates, things kind of going on around the system. We were going to talk about kind of where we are with our sustainable operations funding efforts. You'll recall we had a conversation about that last year. Kind of basically, how do we fill our operations gap going forward? Also a little bit more about the 2022 World Athletic Championships and an update on Train Song Park you might have seen in the paper. So sustainable operations funding, Craig, can you tell us where we are in that effort and what is to come?
Sure. Thanks, Carolyn. And, as you all know, we have had an overview of all the different scenarios that we have been researching lately, as well as back in 2017, 2018, prior to the time that we brought the levy forward. You had an opportunity to kind of do a little bit of a deep dive on those scenarios, and we listened to some of your feedback, particularly around high priority around long-term real sustainable funding mechanism. So our finance team is just still running some of the numbers and looking at some of the models for what that might look like, but we have narrowed the options down to essentially a levy and or a service fee of some sort. So still continuing to look at those numbers, probably get some more information back to you by like March, or at least the next time that we meet. Is that that's another 3 months away? Is that correct? Or when's the next time this team meets, Carolyn?
Whenever we need to. We're not scheduled yet.
So we should have something back for you by March, I would think, or April on that. But do appreciate the feedback that we heard back in November and taking that under consideration.
And then moving on to the 2022 World Athletics Championship, you already heard us talking about the fact that this kind of big festival will be hosted by the city at our downtown Riverfront Park. Also just wanted you to know that, we are also preparing for kind of the eyes of the world to be on Eugene, and for these tens of thousands of visitors to be, kind of moving back and forth between downtown and the university. And so we're looking at our park system that, along the river is a obvious place where we think people will be found. And we've kind of mapped out all of our really popular kind of high use tourist destinations in the system. And we have been working on just kind of some renovations of those, Hendricks Park, Skinner Butte Park Summit, all of the Riverfront Park, downtown, the Gateway area as you're coming over Ferry Street Bridge into downtown, because it's you may not know, but we also in Parks and Open Space are in charge of all of the medians and the stormwater facilities. And so we've just been kind of mapping where we think people are going to be and doing our best to kind of renovate those areas. And in the next several months leading up to July, there'll be a lot of what we call spit and polish, where we're just really putting the finishing touches on things, getting all the cobwebs off of the light poles, some color spots in areas, in kind of high use areas, and just making sure things are looking good. So just want you all to know that that's on our work plan, in addition to all the other things we've been doing. We want to put on a good show here. So, and then I should have ended with that note, but we'll, on a more unfortunate note, you may have seen Train Song Park in the news recently associated with some things that are out of our control. And I'm going to turn it over to Craig to tell you about what's going on there.
Well, we're not going to end on Train Song Park, so we all have to think of something a little more positive to
Okay.
close it out with. But yeah, just as you all may have heard in the news, you know, the DEQ has been investigating J.H. Baxter site out off of Roosevelt in West Eugene, and doing some sampling of their property as well as, you know, adjacent properties into that area. Then they went out further into the community and did some baseline sampling, and surprisingly, one of their sample sites was Train Song Park, and surprisingly, they found elevated levels of dioxin there, and alerted us to those numbers in the middle of last week. We were a little bit surprised to hear about it in such a short turnaround. They were getting ready to actually release all of this data, but I appreciate the fact that they did bring it to our attention. And we're working with the DEQ and the OHA on next steps and trying to get a little bit more sampling of the soil out there to find out exactly what is the level of across the board, across the park, what those risks are. The levels of dioxins that are in the soil right now, from our understanding from OHU, is it's predominantly a risk to children 3 and under if they were to spend pretty much daily time out in the park or in the soil, and, you know, even ingesting that. So it's relatively low risk to most people. It becomes higher if it's on residential property. But out of an abundance of caution, the city did elect to go ahead and close that park until we get further sampling and have a better understanding of what's happening in this area. And we'll be working, like I said, closely with DEQ and OHA, Oregon Health Authority, as well as LRAPA on those next steps. But right now, unfortunately, that park is closed until further notice. So on a positive note, anybody come up with anything? I'll just mention EPF. I mean, part of our funding strategy has been to work with private partnerships, and EPF is our primary conduit to do so. And over the last several years, we've worked extremely hard to try to increase their capacity to bring in capital donations and other donations into the park system. And I'm really happy to report that they're in a much better place than they were a few years ago. If Scott Sanders were here, he would definitely tell you. And Jill is also on that board as well. And so there's a lot of energy, a lot of momentum. They've hired a new executive director. They've launched, well, they're beginning to launch this $2.5 million capital campaign. So I think it'd be great at some point if this board could actually meet with the Park Foundation and just to kind of get to know you. They're a great group, a lot of good folks there, and they're really starting to do some good work. So that's going to be a positive story for us to report back to council as well. And I want to thank all of you for your feedback. Just since I've got the floor right now, and Professor Wagner, thank you for your input, and we'll definitely put that to good use and highlight some of those things that you mentioned. So with that, Carolyn, I don't know if you've got anything more positive that you want to close things out on, a song or anything like that?
No song prepared. There is a lot of good work and Train Song Park does have bond funding. And so we are going to be doing some great things at that park in the next few years. So going to make it right. And yeah, I don't know. Anyone else, Craig Smith, anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just add, that's a really crucial part to that neighborhood. We have a summer fun for all program out there, free to the neighborhood kids. And so to have it close is tough. I hope we can definitely do something about it. So we don't lose it as a resource. And the other thing I'd have to say is thank you to the 3 board members tonight, taking the time, staying with us through the last several years in the COVID environment and how we do things. I think it's just been challenging that way. So I really appreciate you sticking with us. That's all I would have.
All right. Anyone else have anything to add? I add my thanks. Raina, Jill, Whitney, thank you so much for your time and your attention. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Welcome.
I'll say one thing towards here at the end. Usually I step in here and I say, all right, we're going to plan our next one.
I think there may be a few ducks we need to get in a row on our side, just in terms of timing, before we schedule our next meeting. You think that sounds right, Carolyn?
Yeah, I think we want to figure out, we'll want to do an update on the operational funding, sustainability work. And who knows, maybe we could get that tour of Campbell in.
Yeah, so keep an eye out in the next, few weeks. We'll probably start to get our timing together on when we'll have the information we need to share with you. And then we'll reach out and probably keep an eye on these same times and days, because it seems to work. We're low attendance today, but it seems to work in general. And if it doesn't, you let us know.
And I will be sending out a draft letter, so we can just review that via email, and we'll let you know when the city council work session is as well. That should be February or March. Okay, well, have a good evening, everyone. Nice to see you all.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.